These are the modular ruined walls that I built on the channel, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and they have served me quite well over time. Definitely one of the most practical things you can build for tabletop gaming. However, I've never been completely happy with the way they looked. So I finally decided it's time to make some new and improved ones, and I'm gonna show you how I did it. There's a couple things about these original walls that I want to improve on. One is the size of the bricks. The original ones are just too large, and the way they're stacked with the big gaps in them just don't look very realistic. The paint job could be improved. And last, I'd like to eliminate the base that I needed to put on these ones. While the base actually kind of looks good with some of the rubble, it means you can never push one side of the wall up against anything like a dungeon tile. So when making these new ones, I went with much smaller pre-made bricks. I have a whole video showing how I make these, and I'll link that in the video description below. My size of choice here is 5mm by 5mm by 10mm. In my opinion, this is the best looking and most realistic brick size you can get without getting so small that it's impossible to actually deal with making them. The original walls just had the larger bricks stacked on top of each other, but with these little ones, that would not work. That also isn't the most realistic looking way to assemble the walls. So with these, I opted for a substrate in the middle between two layers of bricks. You could use various materials for this, but myself, I decided to use the same XPS foam that I made the bricks out of. This way I could make it any thickness that I wanted, which was 1 centimeter. The reason for that thickness choice was that it's the same as the length of the bricks, which just visually I think would kind of tie everything together. With these, I'm not trying to replicate a inner brick wall, rather just a filling of concrete and rubble that you sometimes saw on old historic brick wall builds. Like castle walls were often just filled with crap and debris, and that's the look I'm going for here. I then cut these longer strips down into 6 and 3-inch pieces. This is because my dungeon tiles that I would use them with are 3x3 tiles. So I want to make walls that fit those, but this could actually vary depending on how you want them to look or what you want to use them with. Once the stack was cut to length, I just glued them together in L shapes. And I just used basic hot glue with a low temperature glue gun. And once they were all assembled, I basically just cut them in half with a jagged, uneven line. This gives you a nice wavy, broken sort of line to work with. You can actually take your one piece that you cut in half, split it apart, and you have 2 usable wall substrates. You can obviously cut these with a knife, but I prefer a hot wire just because it's a lot faster to do. Keep in mind, it's not only okay, but actually recommended if these wall sections are cut a little bit shorter than the length of your tile intervals. This way, when you're placing a bunch of walls on tiles, they don't overhang and get in the way of the next wall. It's better to have a little gap between wall sections than ones that are butting into each other and screwing up your layout. I then took some of the leftover cutoffs and just made some basic intersecting T-shapes. I obviously don't want everything to be like an L-shaped wall. It's nice to just have some interior walls, but they probably wouldn't stand up on their own. And to avoid having that little base that I have on my originals, I'm instead using a little intersecting piece of wall to give them some stability. And if any of the little offcuts that are used to make these intersecting pieces are too tall, that's not a problem. Once they're glued together, you can just cut off the excess. And then the real work begins, stacking all the bricks. I like to start from the outside corners and work outwards. This way the pattern stays true because you're starting with it. And when you get to the ends, you can run your bricks long past your substrate and deal with that later. You definitely don't want the bricks ending shorter than the interior of the wall. That won't look quite as good. In the case of small pieces like this, I actually prefer to use hot glue for attaching all the lines of bricks. When you're working in such a small space, there's not enough time for like a PVA or carpenter glue to dry in order to keep moving on. Things will start shifting around on you. Hot glue is gonna lock it in place right away, but it also has a really cool added bonus, which is that the hot glue lines will add a surprising amount of weight to the finished product. You might not expect it, but you end up using like a stick of hot glue on like one little wall section, and that's not an insignificant amount of weight to add to your foam. When you get to the tops, it's also a good idea to make sections of the brick go higher than the substrate. And it's fine if you glue some of these on crooked. In fact, it actually makes the whole thing look better if you do. Once your outsides are done, you gotta flip them around and do the insides. And again, it's good to work from the inside corner outwards. The downside to using hot glue is that it will often leave a lot of strings or a little residue and stuff, but you can easily wipe this away just like with your hands, just rub it off, not a big deal. Before we move on, I gotta take a second to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is my favorite all-in-one website host and builder. They've got a ton of templates that make building websites super easy. I personally use it both for my blackmagicraft.ca website as well as my idolsoftorment.com one. Not only does their drag and drop system make it really easy to update my website, their integrated e-commerce section and storefront makes it very easy for someone like me to run a small business selling my product and shipping it out throughout the world. I can't say enough about how user-friendly Squarespace is. I've used just about every single one of their competitors, and Squarespace is my favorite. Cool thing is you can go try it out for free, use the link in my description, sign up, try it out, build a website with their template, and then when you're ready to launch it, use the link and the code in my description to get 10% off your website or domain. Honestly, Squarespace is just good. All right, so you got your walls assembled. They're not quite ready for paint yet though. You can make them look better. One important step is breaking away some of those overhanging bricks on the ends of the walls. You don't want to do all of them, you just want to do some of them, enough to make it look like this wall actually did take damage and, wasn't just half built. More importantly, you want to break up that substrate inner layer. The easiest way that I found to do this is to take an X-Acto knife and cut a line down the center of it and some cross cuts, and then use some kind of like hook-like sculpting tool to just tear away foam. You want it to break in different size chunks and leave a really gnarly looking texture. But all those little pieces you break out, don't throw them away. You're gonna use them. Take some glue, slather it in the middle, and jam those broken pieces back in there. This is gonna give a really nice rubbly look that will make it look like these walls aren't just foam bricks glued to a center panel of foam. It's gonna make them look truly broken and cool looking. Now, something I've been doing a lot recently on builds is using caulking as a grout on my foam bricks. Again, this is to fill those little gaps between the foam so that you don't end up with gaps that are impossible to paint and look weird. In the past, I've used Alex Fast Dry caulking that I just mix with black paint, but if you can find some pre-tinted black caulking that is paintable, it's important that you don't just use like pure silicone. You can go ahead and use that as well. I use this Dynaflex. It is black and it is paintable. Really important. You don't want to cover these in something that paint isn't going to stick to in the next step. I work it into all of those gaps and then wipe away the excess. And the easiest and cleanest way to do this is just have like a bucket or pitcher of water and a regular kitchen sponge and take your time to wipe away all that excess on the surface. You're not trying to cover the bricks, you're just trying to fill the gaps. For like the ends and the rubble and the broken section, it's easiest just to use a paintbrush and dab it in and smash it in there. This will lock all that rubble in place and again, fill any little crevices that are hard to get paint into. And then once that's dry, you can actually move on to painting. Now you can obviously do this with craft paint. I have shown like literally an insane amount of projects that I've painted with craft paint. It works totally fine. In some cases, maybe even better. But when I'm doing like repetitive painting, a lot of little pieces that are the same, I do prefer using an airbrush and inks, but don't be put off if you don't have that. Seriously, just like dry brushing with craft paint, totally fine. My final stage of painting is a simple dry brush using a makeup brush and some craft paint. I like to use fog gray because it's like a warm, light sort of beige, but any light, gray or off-white is gonna work fine. Again, you don't want to go too heavy-handed with this, just enough to make like the different layers of brick pop out and look three-dimensional. These are very simple to build. If you find they're not heavy enough, you can add some weight by just drilling in some screws or some lead fishing weight, something like that. That's something that I'm gonna do later, I just didn't have any. What I like about these and why these old ones got used so much for me is that they're basically useful in every type of tabletop game. You can throw them on an exterior setting just as ruins. Great for wargaming, breaking up line of sight, decorating a board quickly, or you can actually use them as interior dungeon walls to give players a visual on what the room layout is. And in that case, like the actual ruined walls, like maybe they're not representing ruined walls, but it's sort of just like full walls fading into the background, getting out of the way of players seeing it. These are so versatile. I think that the amount of effort that you put into making them versus how much you'll get out of them is probably the best ratio you'll get out of any miniature tabletop thing you can make. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something and that it helps you out make some cool walls for yourself. Please like the video and leave a comment if you did. It helps out a lot. There's a couple ways you can help out this channel and help me keep making videos. One is by shopping for your tools and supplies on blackmagicraft.ca through my Amazon affiliate links. I've got a list of my essential equipment stuff that I use the most. You can buy it for the same price you normally would, but the channel gets a small commission that funds the production of these videos. Another awesome way you can help out the channel is on Patreon. And last, you could just buy something cool from my merch store. I have original art, original builds, and all sorts of cool things that you can buy, add to your collection, and help support this channel in the process. That's it for this one. I'll see you again next time. Cheers.